Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. That it for your 2024 AEW Worlds End instant analysis. That's right, Getting Over is back for the penultimate time in 2024, breaking down everything that happened during AEW Worlds End, that company's final pay-per-view of the year. We have an absolute ton to get to on the show, as we always seem to, of course. So off the top, we're going to get through this real quick. Allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
Please leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you write one on Apple, we'll read it here on the show. Don't forget,
I happen to love the number 5.
I hope you do as well. Please financially support Getting Over. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can be an official Getting Over head. You get instant reaction audio, exclusive news posts, all of that at buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast, and follow us on Blue Sky at Getting Over. The latter two for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can send in questions and comments for the show, and you can vote in pre- and post-show polls surrounding pay-per-views like this one. Your thoughts on AEW World's End will factor into our final review of the show at the end of this episode. Also, pinned to our profile on both Twitter and Blue Sky, we have a ballot for the 2024 Sports Podcast Awards. Getting Over is nominated as Best Wrestling Podcast. Please vote for us as many times as you want. Click those links. You can at least do it once per day. You can probably do it more if you're pretty smart. Vote for Getting Over as Wrestling Podcast of the Year. We won coming out of 2023. We want to win again. Go back to back coming out of 2024. We would greatly appreciate that. As we get into tonight's program, it is an instant analysis. That means, as a special occasion, the Silver King gets to crack open a cold one. And I have a 2-pump chump from, not self-descripted beer, by the way, a 2-pump chump, though, from Angry Chair Brewing in Tampa, Florida, what I believe is the best brewery, by the way, in Tampa. Shout out to the guys and girls over there. Let me welcome Vintage Chris Vanini, who is indeed along for the ride tonight. Chris, what do you have over there?
Nothing with that provocative of a name, that's for sure. I just have a Angry Orchard hard apple cider right here.
We're both angry tonight. Hopefully not about AEW, just about our beers. This, by the way, is a coffee hazelnut porter, and it is absolutely delicious. So, look, we got a lot to talk about here, and we have a lot coming up, by the way, in the larger Getting Over Wrestling podcast universe. About, I think I said 8 episodes and 11 days coming up, transversing 2024 into 2025. The 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka
the Meaties,
are coming up, as is the 2024 year-end review. We will give you a full breakdown of what you can expect schedule-wise at the end of this program. Chris, I don't think we need to waste any more time. Let's get right into our AEW World's End instant analysis. If you happen to be a first-time listener of this show, basically what we're going to do is break down every single match on the card. We're going to give you some description of what happened in the match, our takes of that, analysis of the match, a match grade, and then at the end, we're going to give you an overall show grade for AEW World's End. We are not necessarily going in reverse card order, but we are indeed going to start where AEW finished. And that was the main event. The AEW World Championship, Jon Moxley defending against Orange Cassidy, Hangman Page, and Jay White in, don't call it a fatal 4-way match. Now, the final episode of Rampage on Friday night mercifully ended with the Death Riders having already laid out Darby Allin backstage. Claudio Castagnoli then presumably snapped his neck with a chair, except he landed with such little force, and Darby didn't sell it at all, that the entire deal was legitimately laughable. And if you didn't watch Rampage, and I certainly don't blame you if that was the case, just check our Twitter feed and our Blue Sky feed, but Twitter especially, at Getting Overcast. I posted a video of that moment just so you can see how kind of ridiculous it was. Mox then kicked him down a flight of stairs. He cut a repetitive promo in the ring, daring anyone in the building who has a problem with them to do something about it. So Commander and Top Flight run out, get their asses kicked. Orange Cassidy got confronted by Marina Shafir, so Willow Nightingale decided to make herself useful despite being absent like a dozen other times in between the last time she saved them. Then Paige and White came out for a brawl, giving the faces an advantage. That led to dozens of random wrestlers coming out for no reason whatsoever. Baby faces, heels, all of them. Christian Cage watched all of this holding his contract on a balcony, and it ended with Pac bashing a fake control panel with a steel pipe to turn out the lights in the arena. Then Mox and Shafir invaded the production truck as a kayfabe way to end Rampage for good. The only thing worse than the booking of this might have been the commentary, which just screamed over everything. And me being generous, this was really bad. But I had to say that because it directly factored into this match. Now, in terms of this four-way, the faces all argued at the bell, then went after Mox with Death Riders coming out to brawl into the crowd almost immediately. Back at ringside after a couple of minutes, Orange did his pockets thing as a distraction so the others could grab Mox for a Shield Steyer powerbomb through the announce table. Nice callback, of course, to the Shield. The Patriarchy watched from a box. Hook watched from another. Mox somehow bled from the back of his head like it was a red ponytail. There were a lot of signature counters before all four guys stood at once. Hangman caught Mox with Deadeye, only to eat Orange Punch, as did White and Mox in succession. Page hit a buckshot lariat on White and a second Deadeye on Mox, plus a buckshot chaser. The referee was knocked out. He wasn't there to count. Page low-blowed Orange, but ate Blade Runner, as did Mox, with Wheeler Yuta taking out the referee. Shafir tried to blindside, only to eat Blade Runner herself. Spoiler alert, this was the best part of the match because it was fully justified. Yuta caught White with Bazaiku knee, and then Mox hit Death Rider for the 1-2-3 to retain the title. And honestly, when this ended, I was like, what the shit? Very NWO type of finish with a ton of heel faction interference and a multi-person match. So none of it was illegal, and Mox could retain the title, but yet, of course, it was still frustrating as a viewer. There were some fun sequences in the match, but as a whole, it just failed to deliver, mostly because you always knew the outcome, and the heel interference didn't just come at the end. It happened literally moments after the bell. So it wasn't a surprise late. Oh my God, the heels interfered and like Mox is going to retain the title. It was a constant harbinger the entire time. And none of the baby faces backstage who supposedly have vested interest in seeing this title come off of Mox, the people who were ready to run down and fight on Friday night at Rampage, none of them had any desire at any point to come out and thwart the interfering parties in this match. It was largely finisher spam throughout. It left a lot to be desired as the main event of a pay-per-view, given what we saw in the Continental Classic final on the same show. Mox and the Death Riders are beyond stale to me. This just did not hit at all. I'm going to say 3.25 stars, B, massively below expectations. The worst match of the night, and I might even be generous with that grade.
Yeah, it was not good, especially given the expectations. I came in, I haven't watched a ton of AEW for the past 3 or 4 months because I've been busy with football and my job and just haven't had time. But when I saw this match at the top of the card, I was like, oh, it's like a big time match. Those are 4 main event guys, all of whom I think could be AEW champion. I know you don't think that about Orange Cassidy, but I do.
I do not.
And Orange Cassidy, I guess starting from the beginning, Orange Cassidy coming out to Where Is My Mind? Has he just gone back to that? Or did this pop up for this match?
I believe he's gone back to it, if memory serves. I believe that's
not case. A big deal. I was just wondering. And also, Justin Roberts on the intro did the thing that I've always said I want them to do with Orange Cassidy, which is not like no sell the whenever, wherever in terms of his weight and where he's from. Lean into it from wherever, and he kind of did that. I was like, all right, that's cool. I like it. Jay White looked like a star. Just his look in this match. The white pants, the hair, everything. Like, that's the look of Jay White, of like guy who could be at the top of the company. Great start. They all team up on Moxley pretty much at the beginning, put him through the table and all that stuff. I was like, all right, this all kind of like makes sense. that doesn't count as Mox bleeding, although he did technically blading, but he did bleed again in the match again, just this time on his back.
He was technically the 5th person to bleed on the show, but the only one perhaps not to bleed.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I hope not. That'd be weird. You know how we always say Drew McIntyre looks amazing in street clothes, and they should use that look as much. It's the complete opposite with Wheeler Yuta, I gotta say. He just looked like a random ass dude out there. So not a great look there. And then the end, I was like, woof.
Yeah.
That's a rough ending. Crowd was dead. Understandably so. Yes, some stuff happened, but yeah, real big letdown. I mean, we all thought Mox was gonna win, but man, Mox is in the spot where it's like he's not dominating. He like could have lost that match like 3 times.
Should have.
Yeah, and so I understand like wanting, maybe one guy had the match in hand, but it happens several times where it ends up where Mox wins and it doesn't feel like an impactful win at all.
Well, it's the typical hypocrisy of the stable leading, heel, where they're so strong and they're so dominant. We saw it with Roman Reigns to a degree, right? But they need help time and time again. It's just Roman Reigns as an example, just to use one, and Hulk Hogan even, we can say, with like the NWO, they didn't come out and necessarily say, we are here to improve the company because we are better than everyone else and everyone must bow down to us. That's Jon Moxley's gimmick. His gimmick is he's so great and they're so righteous that, no one can really step to them and he's better than all of them and none of them deserve it. And yet he had interference this entire match to help him retain the title. That was frustrating to me from a booking standpoint.
Yeah.
So Death Riders were about to take out White after the bell. Why they singled him out as the one they wanted to kill, I can't necessarily tell you, but FTR showed up. Then the lights went out and Adam Copeland returned with a rated FTR logo. He got more pyro than anyone else on the entire show. Christian never threatened with the contract. He just stayed in his box. FTR easily took out Death Riders. By the way, another show in which Pac was inexplicably absent. So they were down a man for no reason. The main event of a pay-per-view. Mox and Cope then went face-to-face. Copeland immediately hit a spear, then did the crossface with a chair rod. He then yelled into a mic that rated FTR is taking it all, as Tony Schiavone told us, God, I love AEW. God, I am sick of Tony Schiavone. This trio does make sense to take those titles off the Death Riders, perhaps as part of a larger conglomeration, no pun intended, that ultimately takes them down. But they're not even getting a trios title match on Dynamite Fight for the Fall, and they're just getting a regular trios match. I presume they'll win and then get a title match, but regardless, it sure seems now like Mox and Cope will be the next pay-per-view title match. From a popularity standpoint, that works. Promo and story-wise, it will probably hit as well, especially with Cage holding that contract. He can get involved. Maybe he costs Copeland the match, then he tries to cash in, and Copeland costs Cage the cash in. Lots of things they can do there. I'm just not sure I actually care about any of it. Ultimately, returning Copeland here as opposed to on the special Dynamite, it made sense. It was a way to promote that show, get more people watching, presumably. Copeland and someone else who returned could potentially be there, plus the streaming situation with Max. That should give AEW a nice boost for at least one night this coming Wednesday. I understand why this main evented the show, the idea, the concept, because of Cope's return. I wish it had not. Also, his haircut was ridiculous. I don't even know how to describe it to you. It looked like one of those I can't even describe it. It's like one of those little dogs that has a puffball on the top of their head, but then it's like straight hair going down the back. You might even know the breed I'm talking about. I can't think of it right now. Like a pom dog, one of those. It looked awful.
Pomeranian?
No, I don't think. I'll figure it out while you talk. But yeah. I got off topic. Didn't necessarily love this, but Copeland does bring energy, and the crowd responded to him. That was cool.
Yeah. Definitely a better way to end the show than Mox winning, like have the return and all that. That's a much better way to go. It was a little weird when FTR comes out and Schiavone goes, we were told they're not medically clear. They're out for the year. Man, it's December 29th. The year's almost over.
Yeah, I know. And they have a scheduled match. And they have a scheduled match 4 days from now, by the way.
Yes, and I just chuckled at that. Also, then Adam Copeland. I'm gonna keep calling him Edge. He's Edge to me.
He's Edge, I know. Yeah.
Edge gets the the bad microphone, that was a tough spot. Obviously not his fault.
For way too long too. Like they didn't fix it right away. It took him a couple minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not on him. That's production, which has had some issues in the show. Production did.
Yeah.
And then the next one being Fight for the Fallen in Asheville. Obviously recovering from the hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important show. That's a good way to start off the year, and it's for a good cause. Obviously, I caught a minute of the post scrum, and Copeland had said that the water boil, thing was just lifted like 3 weeks ago where they live. They've been using bottled water for 3 months since a hurricane. So I think a lot of times, these natural disasters happen, and after a couple of weeks, people kind of move on in their lives. But there's still a lot been going on there. So I think it's really cool that AEW is doing that, and all three of these guys obviously live there. So I think it'll be really special to them. Copeland had said he's been cleared for a while to return.
Mm-hmm.
But just Tony was like, no, it's okay. Stay home, do all that stuff. So that's fine. I think this was, I get upset when AEW doesn't do returns in a good way.
It was good. It was well done.
There was another one on the show that wasn't good, but this was good.
Mm-hmm.
Edge is back. FTR is back. Going into a show in Nashville next week. They're going up against the top heels. I had execution wasn't ideal, but I thought this was a perfectly fine and good way to close the show.
Yeah, it was well done, and setting up, momentum for TV at the end of a pay-per-view. That is what needs to be accomplished by this company that they failed to do so many times. So there are many reasons why it was the right decision to main event it, even if I personally disagreed for my entertainment, value. But at the same point, it's like, do people really care? The fans clearly do. It seems they care about Copeland and Mox. It was a huge pop for Copeland. And when they went face to face, like they were into it. I just failed to get excited individually, personally. That's my take from it, but that's okay. It's not necessarily about me. It's about what works for AEW. And this does seem like it worked for AEW. By the way, circling back to the dog thing before we move on. So I was conflating, and I think you guys probably realize this, a Pomeranian, which you mentioned, with a chow chow when I said pom. So that's why I got messed up. So kind of Pomeranian-ish, but I guess it's more like almost like a poodle, like one of those big poodles that has like the puff on the top and then the straight hair down the side. It's kind of what Copeland looked like. Go find a picture of him from World's End.
Is it like the Beavis from Beavis and Butthead haircut?
Yeah.
I didn't notice. Honestly, I didn't notice. He's had some bad looks.
It was thinner. It wasn't even Beavis. That's not even fair. But it was like Beavis if it was thin on top and more circular.
Okay.
It's really, I can't believe you didn't notice it. Go look up a picture while we're talking about it. Maybe we can talk about it at the end of the next match. Regardless, let's move on. We got a lot more to talk about from this show. Let's actually move to the TBS Championship. Mercedes Moné defending against Chris Statlander. Stat caught Moné jumping off the barricade, walked up the steps, and slammed her on the ring apron. Mercedes later countered off the ropes for a powerbomb onto the apron. She had a backstabber, but Stat countered a standing Meteora into a powerbomb and later hit Chaos Theory. Mercedes then did 7 amigos, not 3, 7, and a frog splash. Stat avoided Meteora, hitting a package pile driver. Nice and safe, by the way. They ripped off the ring apron for some reason, with Mercedes landing Monet Maker ringside, then preventing the countout. She trapped Stat's foot in the ring truss and then stomped it, hitting a Meteora off the apron. Stat removed her boot to escape, catching Monet for an F5 into the apron and another into the ring. Mercedes came back with a nasty tombstone pile driver on the apron. She didn't fall to her knees on it. And let me just tell you, as safe as the package pile driver was as unsafe as that move was. Stat beat the 10 count, Monet Maker into an STF for a rope break, then an extended counter sequence that began with Saturday Night Fever, but wound up with an arm hook bridge for the 1-2-3, Mercedes retaining the title. Excellent match between these two once again. Monet seemed to acknowledge Stat a little bit after the bell, and Chris really had no business winning the title as a babyface when she neither deserved the character change nor the rematch, given she just lost to Mercedes 1 month ago. The inconsistency of Mercedes with the countout situation was a little bit frustrating, and the finish was uneventful, just given the lengths that these two went in the match. But it was an appropriate finish to protect Stat a little bit, given they wanted this to be close. She shouldn't have won. I was okay that it wasn't overly decisive. I did think Mercedes was going to cheat to win again. She didn't. This should be squeaky clean, no Stat rematch anytime soon. There's no avenue for them to do a third match between one another. For months, down the line until Stat wins a bunch of matches and somehow deserves it, if they even do it at all. I went 4.25 stars and an A. Mercedes is on quite a run match quality wise right now. Better finish, couple better sequences, a little bit more sensible with the count out. This might have been even higher than that, but it was an excellent match. Second or third best match on the entire show.
Oh, this was best match on the show for me
Really?
by far.
Wow.
Yeah, this was match of the night. I thought this was fantastic. Not 5-star quality. There were some issues, but to me, it was clear and away the best match on the card. They built it up pretty good with the video package and stuff like that. The introductions, they made it feel like a big deal, and that's really important. I always forget also how bad Mercedes music is.
It's terrible.
I noticed they added her lyrics to it now, so but every time, man, it's tough. But yeah, like the moves were great. These two have a great chemistry together. They really do. The count out thing, maybe this is what you were talking about, but this is the issue I had. So Statlander's trapped outside and Mercedes attacks her, goes in the ring, comes out, keeps attacking her, and the ref comes to break that up. Like, why is the ref doing that? Why is the ref stopping someone from an attack outside the ring? He should be counting.
Right.
And what Mercedes should have been doing was standing out there, beating her up till it gets close to 10 and you go in. That's the way you do it in the video game. And I only say that because we just saw Carmelo Hayes do that with Braun Strowman or something like that. So it's fresh in my mind of like, it is tough to kind of kayfabe your way around some countouts sometimes. But it was really weird that the ref tried to break up an attack on the outside.
Well, it was just she stopped the first count out at 9.5 when Stat was not coming into the ring. So she would have won the match. Okay, she's a heel, but she respects the sport and wants to win and beat her in the ring. Fine. But then she sets up multiple other opportunities for her to get counted out, kept rolling in and out of the ring. And then the last time she beats the count and she's like surprised. You didn't want her to win by count out, or I should say you didn't want to retain the title by count out. So you should be happy that she got into the ring at the end, right? Not surprised that it was nonsensical the way they did it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I had to downgrade it a little bit because it just was stupid.
But the finish, I love the finish. I thought that was so cool and creative where she's like working really hard to like figure out how to get a pin. And you're watching this thing and like, what the hell is she doing? And Stats like doesn't quite totally know what she's doing until it's too late and she's caught in a pin she can't get out of. Like that was Bryan Danielson level of creative pin to win a match. I thought that was a fantastic way to do it. Where like Mercedes couldn't overpower her, but she did outsmart her. And I love when a heel can outsmart the babyface and not cheat. So I love the finish as well. I thought it was great, man.
Yeah, it wasn't even outsmarting. It was at wrestling. She beat her.
Yeah.
She was better than her in the ring. And that's the way the match ended. I loved it. I thought this was a fantastic match. Like I said, Mercedes has been on a total roll. I wouldn't say this is her best match of the year, but the fact that it's not tells you all you need to know. The women's wrestler of the year is going to be immensely interesting, right? I think men's wrestler of the year in the 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka I like that I caught you mid-yawn. That's perfect. Because you try to do it unique every time, and that was indeed unique. They're going to be interesting because from a work rate standpoint, there's clear winners as far as I'm concerned. But is Wrestler of the Year just about how good your matches are? Or is there more to it, right? That's what everyone's going to need to decide, both when it comes to Women's Wrestler of the Year and Men's Wrestler of the Year. Speaking about the potential Men's Wrestler of the Year, let's move over to the Continental Classic. 2 semifinals and a final to crown the Continental Champion, and we will do these in order. Will Ospreay fought Kyle Fletcher in the first semifinal. This appropriately and rightly opened the show. Both guys wore light colors, which was super annoying. Ospreay took an apron bomb and lawn dart into the barricade, which he bladed deep for a full Crimson Mask, really for no reason, just minutes into the match. I say no reason because of the way he took the bump, and it wasn't something that would lead to someone getting cut open. Fletcher licked the blood multiple times because, AEW. Ospreay hit a standing sky twister, which was super impressive. There was a nice sequence ending with a standing Spanish fly. Ozcutter, Poison Rana followed, with Fletcher no-selling and then hitting Hidden Blade after. Then they headbutted each other like rams a dozen times. Ospreay landed Hidden Blade for a false finish off a referee distraction. The referee was again used for a Fletcher brainbuster for another false finish. Ospreay also kicked out of a last ride style Liger bomb before a really nice counter sequence out of a brainbuster rolling into Styles Clash for Ospreay to get the win. Excellent match, excellent ending. Love that Ospreay won with a signature. They limited the false finishes to, I think, 3 total, I want to say. There were multiple parts of the match that were not for me personally, mostly the no selling spots. The blading was unnecessary, again, from the standpoint that it came in a situation where Ospreay getting cut was nonsensical. However, it was completely reasonable booking because it was done to create further adversity for Ospreay in the final match, and ultimately it did somewhat play in to the finish of this tournament. Definite A match. I was kind of between 4.25 stars and 4.5 stars. I kind of wish I could go in between, but since I can't, 4.25 stars with the A. Tremendous opener to a wrestling heavy show, completely delivered, set the show off on the right note.
So, as I mentioned, this was the first AEW pay-per-view I'd watched since I think All In or All Out, because again, I was traveling a lot on Saturdays.
In totality, you've seen bits and pieces, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following it on social media stuff, but I'm thinking like, oh, this is my first AEW pay-per-view in a bit, and we've immediately got a Crimson Mask happening, like right off the bat. And I was just like, all right, we're still doing this, I guess. And so it just kind of like took me out of that for a minute. It turned out to be a theme for the whole show. But good match, obviously, as you would expect between these guys. I like the idea that Fletcher's cheating attempt kind of cost him in the end. Styles Clash finish.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to feel about it because, for one, I know it's an Ospreay signature move, but to me, it's still the AJ Styles finisher. And just on Dynamite, it didn't finish a match.
Correct.
That he had.
So,
and I know he's done it before where it hasn't finished a match. And so it's like, it didn't feel like a finisher to close the match. And I wasn't sure.
So yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So first of all, even for Styles these days, it's technically not his WWE finisher. He has won matches with it, but obviously he uses phenomenal forearm. For Styles, for Ospreay, I would consider it his 4th finisher. I'm trying to think. He has Hidden Blade. He does the Tiger Driver. He does the Sky Twister, and he does the Stormbreaker. And I would say Styles Clash, therefore, is right on the same lines as Sky Twister. So it's like a 4th finisher / signature move. That's kind of where it exists. It was appropriate to end the match from the standpoint of what led up to it. The sequence of moves and events and kickouts that led to the Styles Clash. Had he hit that first and won with it, I would have completely agreed with you. I think there's also an issue, and we say this all the time. It comes to AEW, comes to WWE, that these wrestlers hit the same effing moves in all these matches, and they go for pinfalls, and they never win. You have Sami Zayn hitting Blue Thunder Bomb after Blue Thunder Bomb, and he's shocked every single time it doesn't get a 1, 2, 3. Yeah. At some point, Blue Thunder Bomb needs to end an effing match in WWE. At some point, a Cody Cutter should end a match in WWE, right? For Kevin Owens, at some point, a pop-up powerbomb again needs to start ending matches in WWE. Styles Clash even, for AJ Styles. So here, the fact that he had already hit pretty much all of his moves, I don't think he hit Tiger Driver. No, he didn't. So Tiger Driver is the super finisher for Ospreay.
Yeah.
So he didn't hit that, but he hit pretty much everything else. And Fletcher had either kicked out or didn't get covered for it. And then he finally got caught with this on a huge counter. That's why I thought it was an exceptional finish. And I love that we actually got a fall with the signature.
Yeah, no, I think it was just because I had just seen it on Dynamite not finish a match.
Totally.
Like,
No, you're right.
And I'm not saying every match has to finish with a finisher, but this kind of match against this kind of opponent, I thought that it was. I was like, oh, all right, that was it. And that made me think that Ospreay was going to win the championship after winning this when he won it like this.
Right,
so,
because then he hits Tiger Driver and actually wins the whole thing. Is the expectation.
Yeah. So also one thing I'll say here and the championship it applies, but Ospreay is fantastic at kickouts. He is one of the best, maybe the best doing it right now. The 2.99. It's such a little thing that is so important. And he's really good at that.
Ospreay, Okada, Omega, and surprisingly to many, Roman Reigns. It's freaking fantastic at the 2.9 kickouts. Those 4 guys, probably best. There's others, obviously, in Japan. Tetsuya Naito, some others are really good at it. But those 4 are truly exceptional. So moving over to the second semifinal, Kazuchika Okada against Ricochet. Conversely to the other match, these guys both wore black. Visually, AEW needs to get a handle on this, even though it's much tougher to confuse Okada and Ricochet. But Fletcher and Ospreay, both guys wearing extremely light colors. Again, you're not really confusing them, but visually you want a more defined structure. It's why at WrestleMania, one person shows up in white, and it's a big deal because it really stands out. For the first match, nothing stood out, visually. And second match, kind of same thing, although again, they're vastly different sizes. Anyway, Ricochet kept pausing to do the D'Lo Brown head shake during the match. I got to give Excalibur some rare credit. He had a really good line talking about Okada having a low heart rate during matches because he wrestles so methodically. He doesn't go up and down. Ricochet missed a 450. Okada hit a nice elbow drop. Ricochet countered into Vertigo with a really scary landing, and he hit a great shooting star press. Okada avoided Spirit Gun twice, hitting Rainmaker with an awesome sell by Ricochet, flipping over for the win. Part of the gimmick for Ricochet here is that he's his own worst enemy, but it was only brief fleeting moments that we actually got to see it in the match. Okada won rather definitively, which was exactly how it should have been, given he's the defending champion and basically had every single physical advantage in the match, and career-wise is historically a much better wrestler than Ricochet. It was slower than I expected over the first half. Nothing that special happened. This will probably be the most overrated match on the show by other people. I had it at 3.5 stars on a B.
It just felt like they were doing moves to each other. It didn't really feel like a match.
Mm-hmm.
And that is sometimes an issue with AEW because in this match and in other matches, the fans they're pretty quiet in that they're just waiting for the next move.
Right. Oh,
like, all right,
they want to give you
what's the next high spot? All right, then we're going to react to high spot. And then we're just kind of waiting around for the next high spot. There's the next high spot. And so it's a weird conditioning that the fans have where WWE has conditioned its fans in the way that it wants the fans to react.
Mm-hmm.
Fans will react to things that are actually not that big of a deal to you and me, but the crowd thinks it is.
Right.
So I think AEW needs to kind of figure out how to get back to that because sometimes, especially in the pay-per-views, we're just waiting for moves and in between stuff doesn't matter. And there was no flow to this match.
So Swerve Strickland surprised by entering after the match, twisting the knife on Ricochet's defeat, reminding that he promised to embarrass him when he lost. Prince Nana rolled out a bunch of toilet paper, handing it to fans so they could throw it at Ricochet to clean up his mess, which they did while saying Happy New Year. Now, my first issue is that Nana comes out with this whole, wheelbarrow of toilet paper. He's only able to hand it out to 25 people, maybe even less than that. They should have had that shit under the chairs where they say, hey, look underneath your chairs. You find toilet paper. Now, I know why they probably didn't do that. They didn't want him throwing it too early. I understand. But it would have been cool if there was 50 or 100 people throwing it versus only 25. Now, this was a fun moment for Swerve's character. I'm not sure, Chris, that AEW fully considered the long-term visual of toilet paper being thrown into a ring with its logo on it. I also felt like this was too early during Ricochet's character to embarrass him to this degree. You all know I've actually been supportive of the heel turn and some of the stuff he's not this past week on Thursday show. I don't like what he's been doing online recently in particular, but prior to that, the cowardice that he's shown and the heel turn, all that, I've actually been supportive of it and others have been critical. I suppose the idea will be this becomes motivation for him to interfere and cost Swerve against Bobby Lashley in a rematch. Then Ricochet gets added to the Herp syndicate on the back end. But when I saw this go down, I was just like, I don't think you guys thought this through.
See, I didn't think that at all because it didn't look to me that different than normal people throwing streamers into the ring, which is what it was and which is what they do. I thought the segment was pretty hilarious. And to do the countdown to make sure everybody did this at the right time, I thought it was great. I thought it really worked. Whoever threw the ones that went over Ricochet's shoulder nailed it perfectly because then when we got the camera shot in front of Ricochet and he's got two crossing streams of toilet paper on him, it's good. It was
yeah, that was lucky. Yeah,
it got lucky. It worked out. It looked really good. It was also funny when Swerve's he was basically Ricochet, you've done everything I expected when he came to AEW, and that's run your mouth. And I gotta say, no one when people thought Ricochet going to AEW, it was not because of the words that come out of his mouth. That was not the reason that people thought he was going to tell us. inadvertently kind of funny, but
It was.
I like this. I thought this was a fun little gag, and I didn't get the same. To me, the visual looked no different than a lot of the streamers. And
Well, again, it's more from the standpoint of people throwing toilet paper at an AEW ring, not how it looked on the individual night, because we know the context. I'm talking about, 6 months from now when AEW does something bad and people start posting this clip of AEW being quote unquote trash. I didn't think they considered that, is what I'm trying to say. Things live a lot longer on social media.
I know what you're saying. If we didn't always get the streamers with the Young Bucks and everything, I would agree.
Yeah, but how often do you even get that these days? I mean,
I know, but if it was, if WWE did this, I would feel that more because we never see it.
Especially if they did it like in 2019 or something like that. Yeah. I'm with you. It was kind of the first thing that popped into my head, and I saw a lot of people kind of agreed with that. But no, I totally understand if you didn't put it in that kind of context. In the moment, it was fine. I still thought it was too early to do that to Ricochet's character, but alas. Ospreay's face was still completely bloodied backstage. This is after Ricochet's match, so like 25 minutes later, his face is still bloody. Will said he didn't care about the blood, but since he's like 2 of 10 all time against Kazu, he needs all the fans behind him so he can go to Disney World with the title. Then he quoted Tony Khan, but it wasn't a Tony Khan quote. He also said fuck, and MJF said fuck 3 times later in the show, so there was a lot of fuck during AEW Worlds End. This was a good way to get the fans further juiced up for the match. I just kind of found the segment to be a little bit ridiculous.
I liked it. It was good context, because to say like, hey, I pretty much never beat Okada. I need the fans behind me. Need you guys to help me. That's like babyface 101 stuff. No, we didn't need an F-bomb and some other stuff. And yes, it was kind of weird to have a crimson mask after the first match of the night. But him saying
after the second match of the night,
and him being like, I'm a little bit lightheaded right now. I don't know what's going on. Like, I thought it was good. I thought it was great little babyface building for Ospreay. And I have more Ospreay thoughts I'll say for at the end of the other match. But I like this.
Let's hope we'll agree on this. We had Okada against Ospreay for the Continental Classic crown and the Continental Championship. Will was mostly cleaned up. He had his head wrapped for the match. Okada hit a few early DDTs ringside before ripping off the wrap. Obviously, he was concentrating on the head. Ospreay did Oz Cutter off the barricade and another in the ring. Okada hit an elbow drop plus a drop kick sequence. Rainmaker countered into powerbomb plus a Styles Clash by Ospreay resulted in a false finish. Rainmaker false finish followed. Possibly the first such kick out in AEW. If it's not the first, then I definitely think it was the second. It was sensible because Ospreay's probably kicked out of Rainmaker 20, hell, even 30 times in Japan. Ospreay purposefully started bleeding before countering Rainmaker into a standing Spanish fly, which was really sick. Okada countered Oz Cutter with a dropkick. Ospreay then reversed Rainmaker and hit Stormbreaker for a false finish. Okada flipped out of Tiger Driver, hitting Rainmaker. They ultimately countered all 4 of their finishers and signature moves in succession, with Okada ultimately landing one more Rainmaker to win the tournament and ultimately retain his title. It was the match of the night. I thought it was the match of the tournament. Probably the match of the last however many months in AEW. The blood and exhaustion helped excuse the loss for Ospreay. Okada got to celebrate his 5th major tournament victory. He actually already has 5. This was his 6th. Also, this was AEW calling itself a major tournament, which I actually agree because there's a lot of high quality wrestling. I don't think they should be the ones arbitrating that, just like people criticize WWE for arbitrating certain things. But this match was 2 of the best in the world wrestling, like 2 of the best in the world. Matches like this are why we reserve our top grades and don't throw them around flippantly for every spot fest that happens to exist. People no-selling moves and doing all that type of bullshit. Not only was the wrestling excellent and the finish top tier, but the way the match slowly built and their history worked into some of the spots and sequences that made them just phenomenal. Given this was the second match of the night for both of these guys, that was even more impressive. It was Okada's best match in AEW. It was the first time he actually looked like Kazuchika Okada in AEW. It was an A+. Right now, I have it at 5 stars. I'm going to rewatch before Thursday's show.
Wow.
It's possible that I alter it back down to 4.75. I thought it was better than anything else on this show by a significant margin. Absolutely loved it. Like I said, it's an A+ no matter what. Whether it's the 5 or the 4.75, I will determine with finality on Thursday.
I bet you probably pull back off of it.
I don't know.
I thought it was a good match. I thought Mercedes' stat was better, maybe because I felt like there was a bit more of a story behind that.
Well, let me ask you a question. You don't really do match grades, right? But let's make believe you did. So what would you give Mercedes in stat, and what would you give this?
I'd probably give that Mercedes stat a 4.5 and this maybe like a 4.25.
Okay, interesting.
I thought this was good, really good. I didn't think it was anything amazing. So as this match begins, my brother texts me. He goes, I hate when AEW commentators are just like, what a dream match we're about to have.
Me too.
We're so lucky to have it.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically the story of AEW for 5 years, and I'm done with it. I want stories with characters. And I agree with that, but also this is a tournament. So it's like the wrestling is the point, which is why I liked when Ospreay did his promo saying like, I need the fans behind me because I rarely ever beat this guy. Like to me, that's why that added a lot to it. To me, Will Ospreay needs to be the face of this company.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
He needs to be at the top. He needs to be the champion. He needs to be chasing for the world championship. I'm stunned that they haven't done it yet, because we'll talk more at the end of this episode about just like the general state of AEW, but you need stars, and this guy's a star. And Okada Ospreay, yes, great wrestling match. They have a lot of history, yada, yada, yada. That's not like it. Will Ospreay needs to be more than that.
Yeah.
And he can be. And I don't know where he goes after this, but he's incredible.
Sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
And just AEW needs to get him to the top of the card as quickly as they can.
He consistently, week in, week out, gets the best reactions. Forget for his wrestling, which is where he thrives, but for his entrance and for his promos and for just showing his face on screen. And look, they have creative plans and don't want to rush Ospreay all the way to the top. And I appreciate that, right? I wish to a degree when it came to major stars, WWE did the same. I didn't think Braun Breaker needed to be Intercontinental Champion right away. I did not believe Rhea Ripley had to be, well, when she won the title initially, I thought it was too early, but the way that she's been booked recently, I think is way too much for someone who is still immensely young in her career. And those are just a couple of examples. In AEW, they struck while the iron was hot with Swerve. They got him the title at the right time. He had a nice long run. He had some incredible matches. Didn't necessarily break through, right? They'll claim that he did, but didn't necessarily break through.
Yeah.
I don't know that Ospreay would either, because there's still that crossover appeal to a degree that isn't there with him. He doesn't have a catchphrase. His promos are really exciting and they're about wrestling and he's passionate.
I tell you what, he has a catchphrase because I use it. That catchphrase is bruv. I have a buddy call him bruv all the time because of Will Ospreay.
Yeah, I mean it's as it's as intelligent as yeet or or what. So it's certainly not something to poo-poo by any means. So I guess if they leaned into that, they could do something with it. That's a fair point. I'm just saying, while I agree with you that he is obviously the best wrestler in the company and the biggest personality in the company, I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of waiting, but there's a caveat here. It has to happen in 2025. And it has to happen at the latest by All In Texas, which is in July. So they have about 7 months from now to crown this guy world champion. If it happens between now and then, great. If it doesn't, it's going to be another huge missed opportunity for AEW.
I still can't believe they didn't do it in London. I think that was a mistake.
They had a huge chance to do it in London. What's crazy about that is, they're not doing All In London this year. They are doing Forbidden Door in London. I think I may have written this down somewhere. I may have even said it on the last episode. If they don't crown him at All In, but they do it at Forbidden Door in London, fantastic. The problem is Forbidden Door is like a co-promoted show and it doesn't have the cachet of All In, which is going to be in a baseball stadium and all that type of stuff. So do you do it at the American Baseball Stadium or do you do it in London in an arena show? It's a tough decision to make. before we move on, I just want to say one thing. I don't like this revisionist history that I'm already seeing immediately after this match that, obviously Okada signing with AEW was the right decision because he had this incredible match. Everyone who said he's been used poorly is clearly an idiot. Was AEW the right spot for Okada to sign? Sure. And matches like this are part of the reason why. But that doesn't change the fact that his booking and character has been absolute garbage since he debuted, and he had a couple good matches kind of sprinkled in along the way. You can't take someone at a high and say because they're at a high now, all their lows don't matter. That's bullshit. It would be like if Chad Gable wins the Intercontinental Championship in 2025. That'll be awesome, and we'll probably love the booking. It doesn't change the fact that Shorty G existed and that he didn't win the title in 2024 when he should have, and then he got into the whole deal with Otis and American Made and the Wyatt Six and all that shit happened. So fuck that noise. I don't want to hear that shit about Okada. He has not been used well in AEW. No. Perhaps it started Saturday, December 28th, and he will be used well going forward. But to this point, the shit he did with the Elite, all the stuff beforehand, it's been garbage. And I don't want to hear otherwise.
Agree.
Okay. So Christopher Daniels entered after the post-match handshake saying he cannot present Okada with the Continental Championship because he's no longer in EVP. Fantastic. That led to the return of Kenny Omega. And I don't know if you agree, but he came out wearing a suit. He kind of looked like Rob Van Dam a little bit, probably because of the way he had his hair tied back. It was exactly what RVD used to do. Great pop for Omega. He went face-to-face with Okada, more out of respect than anger or anything like that. And behind them in the background was the All-In Texas banner indicating that is when they will fight, which makes perfect sense, of course. Commentary played it as not being sure when Omega will be in ring shape. The guy is literally wrestling this coming week in Japan. Commentary then mentioned that match is happening after the fact as an aside at the table, but they didn't get into any details about it, which I thought was just odd. It was a really nice return. Kenny Omega is more important to AEW than most. Getting him back regularly will be huge for the shows. It'll help them feel like they matter. But was this executed as well as it could have been? Not at all.
No, it was executed horribly. This is the exact way you don't bring back Kenny Omega, which is just to stand there or do something. Like, put him in a story. Now, I know he's got a match at, Wrestle Dynasty, which is the co-show with New Japan or whatever, which is weird on its own face. But, Kenny Omega's return from being gone,
a year and a half.
Like a year?
Now, he has shown up. He has shown up.
He hasn't wrestled in like a year.
Over a year, yeah.
And we already know he's wrestling, which is okay. And then this is the way he comes back. I thought this is a completely blown opportunity. You want to do it the way you did Edge and FTR at the end of the show. Make it a surprise. Kenny Omega is your biggest star probably at this, even still at this point. And it's been, the injuries and everything, it's been really rough for him to just come back to stand in front of Okada because they had a bunch of great matches a long time ago. I don't care about that. What I want to see Kenny Omega doing things in wrestling. And that was just oh, all right, he's back, I guess. And he's wrestling he's wrestling in Japan. Okay. So it's just it's very scattered. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad he's back. I did, whatever that means. I did not like the way they handled this.
Yeah, that's totally a legitimate opinion. Let's move to MJF against Adam Cole for the Dynamite Diamond Ring. I had a thought when this match began. I didn't really consider it during the Ultimate Preview. With this show being in Orlando, the crowd was even more favorable to Cole than it would have been elsewhere, given all of his time in NXT. Anyway, Cole sold an ankle, which MJF worked. He also bladed really early in the match. MJF took a header into the flat ring post and bladed himself immediately underneath the ring. This was 4 matches into the show, and there were 3 blade jobs, including 2 in the same match. And none of them were in the street fight. Each guy bit the other's open wound. Cole landed Panama Sunrise and lowered the boom for a false finish. There was a figure 4 spot with a reversal. MJF pulled an Eddie Guerrero fake out to get the Kingdom tossed from the ringside area. He stole the Dynamite Diamond ring, but got super kicked by Cole, who took the ring. Kingdom then distracted the referee, and MJF low-blowed Cole to avoid a punch, hitting Heatseeker for the 1-2-3. MJF then put a chair around Cole's ankle, ready to break it, only for Roderick Strong and Kyle O'Reilly to save by hitting high-low. Cole was still wearing the ring, so he punched MJF in the head, and then he spit on the ring. I got the winner right. I just did not have it come through the totally expected method, at least not entirely. We'll see how Kingdom plays out, what their deal is, whether that was purposeful or accidental. They did celebrate with the other three after the bell, so it seems like now they're all together in a super undisputed Kingdom faction, and O'Reilly's prior problems with them didn't matter anymore. I suppose the idea here was for MJF to get the actual win, but Cole to get the emotional win, and because he actually has a bunch of friends who have his back and stuff. The match was not even in the same universe as what they did at All In, and it left a lot to be desired. If this is the actual end of the feud, fantastic. Get it over with. If it's continuing because Undisputed Kingdom got the best of MJF, heaven help us. B 3.5 stars.
Yeah, this is kind of whatever. And then an example of like the production issue, like the music hits and Roderick Strong comes to make the save, but the camera completely misses it.
Mm-hmm.
We only see it from like above, somebody running down to the ring. Commentary has to tell me it's Roderick Strong because I don't know what the hell his music is. And then that whole thing at the end, and then Shivani, I think it was, says that Adam Cole was the real winner here. And I rolled my eyes as far back at the back of my head as I could. Like, there's something called subtext here, you know?
Right.
They're like, yeah, Cole lost the match, but he's got friends and like he's going to be okay. You don't just say he's the real winner. No, he's not. He lost the match. He didn't get the diamond ring. Don't tell me that when I'm watching professional wrestling if the matches are supposed to matter. Good Lord.
Was the crowd booing Undisputed Kingdom when they were together in the ring? It was tough for me to tell.
I couldn't tell you. I didn't notice.
It was just extremely strange bringing them all back together. I mean, they are basically doing Undisputed Era plus the Kingdom.
Without Bobby Fish.
Without Bobby Fish. Well, Bobby Fish was never, important. And also, by the way, O'Reilly and Strong are a way better tag team. In my opinion, I thought they were more exciting in NXT than O'Reilly and Fish ever were. But I don't know, man. It was a decision. And like you said, the subtext was clear. They hit us over the head with it, even further. Hopefully it's the end. Hopefully they're just like, you know what? That's what we're doing. Both of them won, and we're moving on because I don't want to deal with this shit anymore on my television. That's the best I can say about it. Let's move to the Women's Championship. Mariah May against Thunder Rosa in a Tijuana street fight on Rampage. Rosa beat Layla Gray in 8 minutes. Another unnecessary establishment win for no reason. It was for someone who was already the number one contender. AEW loves doing that. This was third on the card with a really nice intro video involving Thunder's father. Just more proof that this actually should have been built more deliberately, with Rosa perhaps seeming like she actually had a chance to win, as opposed to all this being thrown together. May spit tequila in her face and got speared through a breakaway board that for some reason was put up inside the entrance tunnel. This was apparently Falls Count Anywhere, despite it being a street fight, which is not Falls Count Anywhere. Tijuana rules okay if they want to say that, but I came out of nowhere for me. There were thumbtacks in a piñata, which was super inventive and my favorite part of the entire match. Rosa ate Mayday into them and just kicked out. That was Mariah's finisher, and she just kicked out. The father's cane got stolen and used as a weapon. Thunder did the table ramp spot again and choked Mariah with a chain. May threw dirt from a Tijuana graveyard into Rosa's face and then immediately hit Storm Zero off the apron through a ringside table to retain the title. Gnarly spot, looked real sudden. I assume Thunder was okay, but I would not have been surprised if she wasn't. This was more convoluted than it needed to be, but it was successful. The AEW women's division, they have set a really high standard when it comes to hardcore matches. You mentioned that, Chris, on the Ultimate Preview. This did not live up to that. The piñata was cool. The finish was too sudden. It looked dangerous. I hope she is okay. Again, 3.5 stars and a B. I might even be a tad generous with that grade.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, that's it? I mean, like you mentioned, we had like 4 or 5 people blading on this show, and none in the street fight. The only match that actually had a stipulation of any kind. So that was weird. This was disappointing in that sense because the bar is so high for the AEW women's matches. Now, look, there was also really no story going into it, so you know you get what you pay for.
Mhm.
But yeah, whatever. It wasn't that hardcore either. In the end, either I was like, all right, Tijuana Street Fight's not a match style that I care to see about again. I guess give me a Chicago Street Fight or some other city. Other cities appear to have better street fights, although they don't have Falls Count anywhere.
Yeah, to your point, if that's what we can expect from a Tijuana street fight, I don't want to necessarily see another one. Let's talk about the International Championship. Konosuke Takeshita defending against Powerhouse Hobbs. Hobbs got his go-home moment on Rampage. He focused on Don Callis rather than his opponent. It was way cornier than I would have expected. Takeshita hit a cradle tombstone pile driver, which was pretty impressive given Hobbs' size. Blue Thunderbomb got a 1 count, then a superplex and senton, only for him to get caught with a spine buster. Hobbs came back with an avalanche power slam, but sold an injured knee and removed his brace, which was really nonsensical for a guy in his position. Takeshita immediately put him in a guillotine and hit Raging Fire for the win. This match exceeded my expectations, but the finish fell so far below my expectations that it kind of reduced what was going to be a decently high grade for this match. It was unnecessarily sudden. You could argue unnecessarily clean as well. Now, to be fair, we did get a dosage of
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
and that was great, but it was also kind of slow because of that. So again, I'm not trying to be repetitive, but I'm at 3.5 stars and a B. I was going to go 7.5. I was going to give the B+, but the finish just kind of killed it for me. But Hobbs, I thought was impressive. Get the promo right, and that guy is golden.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could say that with a lot of people. I thought it was okay, but better than I expected, I think. Hobbs kicking out of the Blue Thunder Bomb at 1 and the way everybody sold that was really good. I'm just really done with Callis family. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a collection of folks. And as someone who hasn't been watching the day-to-day of AEW, to come back after a while and see how many people are still with the same people or are generally doing the same thing was kind of shocking. Not much actually changes months at a time. But the match, it was good. It was solid. It was what I expected, a little bit better, but yeah.
So there were 3 0-hour matches. I promise I'm going to go through these real quick. Toni Storm against Layla Gray. Fans chanted she's a rookie, which played into Tony's gimmick. That was kind of fun. There was no reason behind the match. Gray did a nice cutter into a Dragon Sleeper. Storm briefly moved into her Timeless character on a hip attack and won with an inside cradle counter. Nice work. Not going to grade these kickoff matches. It's just not worth the time. Jeff Jarrett fought QT Marshall at 0 hour. Unless this is something that's been happening on Ring of Honor, there was no reason for this match either. Jay Lethal and Aaron Solo got involved ringside before Jarrett won with the stroke. Nice to see him get pops as a babyface. And lastly, the Outrunners in Top Flight fought Leo Rush, Action Andretti, and Murder Machine, also on 0 hour. No reason for this. The non-feuding teams had no relevance here. The other teams are feuding, so I guess that's why they did it. Rush tagged himself in for a frog splash, leaping over Lance Archer to do it. That upset him, but they won the match. Then Private Party came out and danced, and that was it. So that's 0 hour for you. So that wraps up the instant analysis of AEW Worlds End. That brings us to our grade segment. We're going to start with our pre-show grades. Then we will come up with our final grades for AEW Worlds End. First, to set the stage, where we left off on the Ultimate Preview, the Silver King was at a B+, 87 out of 100. That was my expectation. Vintage Chris Vanini was at an 85 out of 100, a flat B. And all of you listeners are getting overheads. You got your opportunity to vote on Twitter at Getting Overcast. You came in 20% A, 43% B+ to B, 28% B- to C+, 9% C or lower. Pretty typical. Averages out to an 85.7 out of 100, so an 86, and right between Vintage and the Silver King, which just always seems to happen, but technically a B, so I guess technically closer to you, Chris. By the way, I did switch up the pre-show poll categories. I figured there's no event where we should go in reasonably predicting an A+, nor a D, nor an F. We've seen WWE and AEW cards for years now that we've done this podcast. And I can't remember a single one where I thought any of those grades would have been legitimate ahead of the show. So we will no longer be doing that. We're going to go with these voting categories going further. I think it gives us a more legitimate score for the pre-show expectation grade for these events. Now, before we get into final grades for the show, Chris, you kind of mentioned this earlier. You've been in and out with AEW over the last few months due to football season. Coming back into it fully for this show and a couple weeks of television preceding it, you're almost like an unbiased third party, I guess we can call you. Someone who has a fresh perspective on this, who's watched the majority of AEW for its existence, but had a couple months where you weren't completely paying attention. So how do you feel after watching this show about the state of AEW and where the promotion is at right now?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be a social media discussion point going into every AEW pay-per-view is like, what's wrong with the company, or what's the state of the company? Oh, the ratings are this. Oh, the live attendance is that. And I think I kind of just mentioned it, but the thing I keep coming back to after not paying close attention for a few months is how little has changed. Like, it's the same people doing the same things. Nobody really changes. And I think that's part of the issue. And I think the top of the card is an issue. The reason WWE is working right now is because the top of the card is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Cody, you've got Roman, you can throw CM Punk in there, Seth Rollins, maybe Drew McIntyre, but you've got like big stars. And pro wrestling has always been a star-driven business. The Attitude Era did not have great wrestling, but it had Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. And those rising
Generation X. Yeah.
top lift all the boats. And I have long felt that AEW is just doing too much with too many people and not enough with the people who should be the stars, the big stars. Will Ospreay being at the top of that list. Everybody feels like they're on equal footing. And when that happens, it's very hard to stand out. MJF to me still stands out as a guy who is a top star, guy who carries himself that way. And I think those are the things that AEW needs to lift everything else. Some of it is like WWE is doing great, and it's just kind of squeezing out some space. They ran a show in literally the same town tonight as AEW did. But I think there's still a lot to like with AEW, but I just think it's still like too much. Even though this was a smaller card with regular length matches.
Yeah.
That's positive. It still feels like the biggest stars don't feel like the biggest stars they should be. Ospreay, Jay White's another one. They got a few of those guys. Those are my big takeaways. As we talk about the soul of AEW, the tagline for the main event match. I mean, you as someone who has been podcasting about this every week, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting because, WWE purports its wrestlers to be superstars. And yet there's a clear hierarchy. And you can move in and out, right? But there's no one out there, even though Jey Uso is super over, there's no one out there saying that Jey Uso is on the same tier as Cody Rhodes or Roman Reigns, just as an example, right? When it comes to AEW, they want you to feel like not everyone, but that a much larger percentage of their wrestlers are on that top tier. They want you to believe that Jon Moxley and Adam Copeland and Orange Cassidy and Jay White and Darby Allin and Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay and Kazuchika Okada and all these guys are all the top tier. And therefore, every single time any of them fight each other, it's a dream match. And don't get it twisted. A lot of those names I just mentioned, obviously I'm not talking about Cope in 2024, no offense to him. But they're some of the best wrestlers in the entire world when it comes to in-ring work. And they're immensely popular for professional wrestling fans. But what AEW needs to do, and this has always been the case, is find those couple people that they can really bank on and build the company around them and figure out stuff for everyone else to do. One of the biggest issues in AEW is they have a roster that is as big, if not bigger, I haven't necessarily counted recently, than the WWE main roster. But they basically air, let's be generous, 3 hours of noteworthy television per week. 2 hours of Dynamite, and one of the 2 hours in totality of Collision is worthwhile. That's the way it has been. Now, they can fix it and they can improve on it, no question. And there were periods of time, like when CM Punk was on Collision and FTR was on Collision, and they were doing that with the Bang Bang Gang, where it did feel like they had 4 hours of noteworthy, reasonable television every single week. But they have pretty much the same roster. There's only a couple women on per episode. The rest don't matter. They get title matches for no reason. Storylines come in and out. It's all crazy. And pretty much the only time major stories develop is on Dynamite, yet you largely see the same people on Collision. And people are going to hate that I have to say this, but it is true. And I'm not suggesting that AEW double up all their titles because they have too many as it is. But they actually need a roster split. They have to give more time to more talent in more concerted situations. That's not what they're doing right now. And they have to bank on a couple people and put the time and effort into making them legitimate stars. Because guess what? Jon Moxley, as well known as he might be as Dean Ambrose, he ain't the guy that's going to take AEW into another stratosphere. Kenny Omega, as great of a wrestler as this guy is, as much as I like Kenny Omega, he's too old to kind of be that person for AEW. His time has come and gone to potentially be that leader. You have Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay, and to a lesser extent, in my opinion, Darby Allin. He has something that could connect with the youths out there. No, I understand that, but he has that Jeff Hardy-esque quality Daredevil thing. He can get on some of these shows and on social media. He's a crossover type of guy is what I'm trying to say. And I think Toni Storm is fantastic. I think Mariah May is fantastic. I don't think that they are necessarily going to be major stars that cross over out of the AEW women's division into the mainstream, like a Rhea Ripley, like a Becky Lynch has. So AEW needs to find these people, and they have them, and concentrate their booking and promotion around them and have the rising tide of those people lift all boats. Until they do that, it's going to be a really high quality wrestling promotion with great matches, lacking storytelling, and it'll have a niche fan base. And that's currently what it is.
Yeah. Storytelling doesn't mean like, oh, you have to do sports entertainment and do timeless Toni Storm and that stuff. You need stories that progress and then they end, and then you go on to something else. I was struck by how little has changed.
There's also this bullshit conflation out there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when people say AEW has no stories, obviously by the word, that is false. They are telling stories in AEW. When they say that, they mean AEW does not have good stories. They do not have interesting long-term stories. They do not have stories that draw the viewer into the product and leave them satisfied once they conclude. That is what's meant when people use the phrase.
That's another
or problem. They don't conclude at all. That's what is meant when people use the phrase AEW doesn't have stories. They don't mean it literally. They mean it figuratively. WWE, some might argue, has either too many stories or does not know when to end stories. And I'm not speaking about the bloodline here. I'm talking about, for example, Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan, although there were multiple injuries that factored into that.
I'm tired of it. Yeah,
exactly. So both shows have areas in which they can improve. Both promotions, I should say, have areas in which they can improve. But with AEW, it starts with building around a core. And they said they were going to do it with the pillars, and the pillars, they turned out to be made of paper mache. Those things fell down largely. And now they have another group of talent, some of which came from Japan, some of which came from WWE, some of which was homegrown to a significant degree. And they just need to figure out, these are the guys and girls, and we need to build this company around them and treat them well from a storytelling standpoint, and not have it all be about how great of wrestlers they are. And by the way, let me just say one more thing, and people who listen to the weekly podcast know I say this all the time. They have to stop making every major storyline in the company about AEW. I don't give a shit about AEW. It's existed for 5 years. It has a TV deal. It's not going anywhere, nor should it. It is successful. I don't give a fuck about the heart and soul of this company, about its existence, about it giving people jobs. I used to care about that. I don't care about it anymore because it's already doing it. So if you keep telling me that we exist to fight the evil WWE, even if you're not using those words, that's basically what you're saying. And there are some people who want to tear us down, but others want to build us up. Who gives a shit? I want to care about why wrestler A wants to fight wrestler B and win title C. That's what it's about, man.
Nobody says, oh man, I can't wait to watch this football game because the quality of football is going to be great regardless of what the outcome means. No, what the outcome means is the most important thing in the end because there's a storyline to it. I think part of the reason the NBA ratings are down is because there's too much parity. I think everybody's there's no dynasties, there's no characters, there's no guys you want to beat and stuff like that.
Chris, can you imagine someone saying, man, I really hope Chiefs Bills in the AFC Championship game is good. That way the NFL can prosper. No one says that shit.
You connect to people. And the one other thing I'll say, there's this narrative that's gone on online among a lot of AEW fans I've seen for the last year or so, which is, oh, well, when AEW moved to sports entertainment, that's when everything went bad. And that's when their ratings and attendance went down. No, two things happened. One, WWE switched to Triple H in charge and immediately got a lot better, and their ratings went up and their attendance went up. Pre that, they were down bad. There was a hole there, and AEW filled it for a long time.
Yeah.
But then once WWE figured things out, some people floated back the other way. And that's just happens because WWE is a very big company. That's okay. That doesn't mean AEW needs to go away. It was not going to be the same. But the other part is, again, that just it hasn't changed. Go look at an AEW show from 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's the same.
It's pretty much the same thing with the same characters. Everybody is the same what they were. They just are what they are. Nobody evolves. Nobody changes. Nobody goes on these long journeys. The only time they ever did that was Hangman Adam Page, which was one of the first things they did. And it was an incredible story. They haven't done anything like that since. And I think people eventually just kind of got tired of it. It's all right, it's the same thing. You can only say, oh man, I can't wait to see those two guys wrestle until it's no longer a special thing to see somebody wrestle. So I think the pieces remain there. The TV deal is there. Everything is set up to be good. You just got to you got to raise a couple of guys who are really your top stars. Ospreay, I think, chief among them. And just do that and not try to be we're the place where the best wrestlers wrestle, because that's not why people don't watch wrestling for wrestling for the most part. They don't. They watch it because they want to feel things.
The masses
connect to characters and stories. Yes. And I'm one of those people.
And
that's
again,
ultimately what we want.
To that point, stop with restore the feeling. We're the best to wrestle. All this bullshit. Oh God, I love AEW. Isn't AEW the best on commentary every single time? 5, 6, 7 times a show. It's enough. Just be great. Just be great, and we'll watch and we'll love it and we'll praise it. That's all it's about. So Chris, that's your state of AEW talk that you wanted to have. What's your final grade for AEW Worlds End?
I'm going to go B-.
Oh, okay. Give me a numerical on that.
Because there's nothing on this that, all the champions retained, including Okada. There's nothing that I'm really going to, go back and watch the clip of to see what happened. Only maybe the Mercedes Chris Statlander match. Edge returning is great, but it's not a holy crap, I gotta watch that crowd pop again or something like that. The Kenny Omega return was nothing. So, but nothing on the show was bad. I think everything was solid to good. There wasn't anything that I felt like I wasted my time. But I think also we were kind of, all of our grades are usually either A- or B+, and I'm trying to expand that range a little bit. And so I'm going to go B-.
Chris, what would you give that from a numerical grade standpoint?
82.
82 out of 100. Okay. So before I give my final grade, we will go to yours. Now, technically, there's 25 minutes left in our poll, so this might change the final numbers, but it shouldn't be that drastically different by the time we get out of here. 18.1% said this was between an A+ and an A. 17.1% said it was between an A- and a B+. 41.5% said it was between a B and B minus, and 22% said it was a C plus or lower. That averages out to an 84 out of 100 flat, but I'd say on the lower side of a B. So when I break this show down, I look at it from a couple different aspects. The first is obviously match quality, entertainment, how much I care about the storylines, and certainly there were a couple returns on this show. I got an interesting comment from John D at Jorge Blanco, spelled Horhay. He said, if Omega hadn't been advertised for the Japanese shows and FTR hadn't already said they would have a third man for Fight for the Fallen, those two returns would have probably hit a lot harder for me. I completely agree with that. Now, I didn't necessarily expect Copeland on the show, but I did know Omega was going to be there. So when he came out and Christopher Daniels did the whole prelude, it was like, okay, here comes Kenny Omega. So like, it wasn't a surprise. It wasn't a moment. Also, and this is no fault of AEW, but you know, when you've seen Copeland make his WWE returns, right? The Royal Rumbles and the other times he's come back, and those incredible returns that you watch a million times, CM Punk making his return, you've seen that a million times. When he comes out and he gets a pop for, 15 seconds and a bunch of pyro, and then it kind of dies down a little bit, you're just like, okay, it's cool that he's back, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily hit in the same way. So that's that. When it comes to the matches, obviously I loved Ospreay and Okada. I thought Monet and Stat was incredible. But really, other than those two matches, I just thought the show was mediocre across the board. And the question is, how much do those two kind of raise the boat? They say rising tide floats all boats. So how much of a tide do those two matches carry across the entire show? And then again, there's the entertainment and storytelling, of which I thought both women's matches, I loved Mercedes and Stat, obviously, but the fact that Stat got the rematch, I had a problem with that from the beginning. The other women's match just happened. Most of the men's matches just kind of happened. The tournament was super exciting. I cared more about the final than I did either of the semifinals. And the main event was a massive disappointment, as was MJF and Cole. Not that I expected much from it, but we saw what they could do at All In, and they didn't come anywhere close to doing that here. So I'm higher than the listeners are getting overheads. I'm higher than you, but really, I thought about doing an 84. I'm going to say it's an 85 out of 100. So, lower than my pre-show expectations. So that's a flat B, by the way. I'm 2 points lower than I was. You're 3 points lower, and the listeners are 2 points lower. So we all thought this show fell below expectations. It was a mediocre show overall. But the best thing I can say about World's End, and this is actually a real compliment, Chris, this was miles better than last year's World's End show, which was a massive, massive disappointment. For the final pay-per-view of 2024, did I think it was worth the $50? It's always a question that we ask. No, I didn't think it was worth the $50, but was it
won't have to pay
entertaining?
$50 anymore. That's another thing that's huge.
Well, TBD. We don't necessarily know that.
Well,
so
yes.
Here's why I say that, right? So I currently pay, now I have a discount because I found a deal around Black Friday a couple years ago, whatever. I do a whole thing. But I believe AEW Max in 4K. So if you want like the best thing that's commercial free, it's $20 a month. If they make AEW pay-per-views $30 a month, guess what? You're paying $50 a month. So sure, you're also getting Max, but you're still paying $50 a month, potentially. So I don't necessarily know that you're getting a huge discount, but to be fair, yes, the price could come down. The question is, though, for this one, was it worth $50? I would have said no. Go find Ospreay and Okada and call it a night, as far as I'm concerned. And Mercedes and Stat as well, excuse me. Go find those two matches and call it a night.
Yes, agree. And I already have Max, and I'm not getting rid of Max, so anything on top of that is what it is to me. Same with Peacock. I've already got Peacock.
Do you have a favorite Max show by any chance?
Oh, shoot. Love Life was fantastic.
Oh, I have that. I never actually saw it. I have that saved.
And you know what? I think they removed it from the service.
Oh, man.
Annoying.
I think I saw season 1, but I didn't see
crazy.
season 2.
I cannot believe it. These original series for the streaming, they're just pulling them off. I cannot believe it. Also, your company Paramount just removed Doug from Paramount Plus, and I'm mad about that because I was watching
so
Doug, the old cartoon.
I am not an official representative. Nothing I say has anything to do with this company. Okay, but this is what I'm going to tell you that I know as a fact, not necessarily about that, but about similar things that have happened with Disney and some other companies. Okay, all these companies get the internal streaming numbers, and when no one is watching shit, they just remove it. A lot of
I
times.
was watching Doug though.
Maybe you were, but you were probably one of
Doug.
12 people who was actively watching it. I'm just telling you what happens in situations like that. If it was being watched, it wouldn't have gotten removed. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Another one, which I also think got removed from Max, was The Other Two. That was great.
That got removed. That is an incredible sitcom.
Yeah.
Incredible. I can't believe that got removed.
Aside from the others, such as your Game of Thrones, I've been doing a rewatch of Game of Thrones. Sopranos is on there. All the HBO classics are still there, though.
I can't believe Other Two got removed. If you haven't seen that, I mean, seek it out, download it. That is an incredible series. I don't necessarily, I asked you a question without really an answer. I do like, it's not my favorite by any means, but there's a show called Bookie. It has sports gambling twist. Sebastian Maniscalco is the lead. It's pretty entertaining as like a 30-minute quick watch. Pretty funny. I asked the question without having an answer, but there are some good Max programs. You just got to find them. It's frankly stuff made by HBO. The rest of the channel for me is completely worthless.
I like it. It's my number one or number two streaming service that I use consistently.
In terms of
just things I watch, that and Disney Plus to me are.
But are you mostly watching HBO
just
content
old movies or TV shows? Yeah, I mean, there's usually an HBO show on Sundays. I've been watching the new Dune show. I like that.
I haven't
There's
seen
always
that yet.
something going on there.
Oh, I just remember the show I like the most. Hacks is an incredible 30-minute comedy.
Heard great things. Have not seen it.
Great show. Absolutely. Must watch. And I'm talking about Max originals. I'm not necessarily talking about, obviously, HBO, which I could go on and on about The Wire or, this or that. Curb Your Enthusiasm, whatever the case might be. All right. Look, we've been going way longer than we anticipated. We said that we were going to do an hour show. Of course, we always over-deliver for you here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. On the way out, let's start with a breakdown of our upcoming schedule, which is immense. On Monday night, we will have your WWE episode. We're doing it early because of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. We want to make sure that you have as long as you possibly can to listen to that show. We tried to release last week's episode on Christmas Eve. That was a mistake. Although you guys did eventually listen to it, it took you a few days. So WWE episode coming Monday night, December 30th, our final episode of 2024. On Wednesday, January 1st, our initial special episode to kick off 2025. It is the 2024 year in review. We'll be back on Thursday with an NXT and AEW show, a second look from AEW Worlds End. On Friday night, January 3rd, special edition, SmackDown Instant Analysis, the first 3-hour SmackDown on USA Network. That means on Monday, January 6th, you'll have another instant analysis for the Raw debut on Netflix. Wednesday, January 8th, the 2024 Getting Over Awards, a.k.a.
The Meaties.
And Thursday, January 9th, your NXT and AEW show. An absolutely blistering 2 weeks to come right here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. 7 episodes between Monday, the 30th, and Thursday, January 9th. On the way out, allow us to hit you with some additional reminders. First, that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
It's all about the five.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave the 5-star ratings. Leave a 5-star written review on Apple. We'll read it live right here on the show. Don't forget,
I happen to love the number 5.
$5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can financially support the continuation of Getting Over and become an official Getting Over head. You get bonus content, fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audios to every major TV show, exclusive news posts. You can get all of it at buymeacoffee.com/Getting Over. We would greatly appreciate that support. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Blue Sky at Getting Over the Ladder 2 for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can vote in pre and post show polls like the ones we mentioned tonight on Twitter at Getting Overcast. And if you check the pinned item on both of those accounts, you can vote for Getting Over as the 2024 Wrestling Podcast of the Year in the Sports Podcast Awards. We won last year. We want to go back to back. The competition is tough. Vote for us daily and as frequently as you want if you can be even smarter about it. That's it for tonight. Like I said, longer than expected, but we over-deliver right here on the Getting Over Wrestling Podcast. For Vintage Chris Vanini, this is the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, for the penultimate time in 2024, leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.